Hey there, friends. It's Mrs. Bailey, and today we are going to be learning about Helen Keller. And I've titled this book, Spirit of Courage. Now, I'm pretty sure that you all know who Helen Keller is. And with that being said, you probably can figure out why I named this book Spirit of Courage. Because courage means bravery. And to have done all of the things that Helen Keller did, she would have to be a pretty brave person. Now, if you've followed along with my other couple of, so far, women history books, then you will know that I told you to fast forward to the end and look at the glossary and look at the words before you started reading the book. In this case, I've put the glossary at the front because it's just easier. So before we start reading this book, please pause it, look at all of these different words, from humanitarian all the way down to courage, and just get familiar with them. You already know them, have heard of them, most of them, maybe not things like the women's suffrage movement, but I would like for you to just kind of get an idea of what they are so that when we're reading the book, I don't have to stop and explain everything. It'll already be in your mind and you'll already know what I'm talking about. So let's get started. And try to follow along also. You know, I always say that. Helen Keller is considered a national icon with numerous books, articles, and movies portraying her life and struggles as a deaf-blind woman in America. Despite her personal challenges with being deaf and blind, Helen was able to overcome her adversity to become a major 20th century humanitarian, author, and lecturer. She's known worldwide as a relentless advocate for the blind and disabled. The advocate, someone who works for the welfare of others. Not only did she champion for the support of the blind, she was also a staunch fighter for the women's suffrage movement, as well as equal rights for all races. Born a happy and healthy baby on June 27, 1880, in Tuscumbia, Alabama, Helen Keller was the eldest daughter of Arthur and Kate Keller. Helen was, by all accounts, a very advanced toddler, able to walk and talk by the age of 1. Unfortunately, at only 19 months, Helen was stricken with a terrible fever which ultimately left her deaf and blind. Doctors are unsure of the exact cause for her illness, but it's now believed to have either been scarlet fever or meningitis. So, before she was even 2 years old, she could not hear or see. And she was born in Alabama. That's down here in the southern United States. Do you know where on this map you were born? Or where you live now? After this life-altering event and unable to communicate, Helen's behavior became very unruly and wild. With limited abilities to express her feelings, she became more of an emotional reactor to situations, laughing uncontrollably when happy, such as when she was tickled, then screaming and kicking when upset or angry. She would have daily temper tantrums. James, her older half-brother, would try to hold her accountable for her actions, but to no avail. Some family members thought she should be institutionalized, as there seemed to be no hope for a child such as Helen. So, before you judge Helen's actions when she was really young like that, try to empathize or put yourself in her position and try to think of how she was feeling at the time. She had lost 2 of her 5 senses, and the 2 that she lost are very big in the way of communicating. If you're blind, you can at least hear everything. You can hear sirens if you're in trouble or if they're behind you and you know you should be wary of something. You can hear voices such as your parents, grandparents, teachers. You can hear music. You can hear the world outside, birds, dogs barking. You still have a way to communicate with people, even if you're blind. So if you are deaf, at least you can see all of the things that I just mentioned. You can see the faces of your friends. And you can verbalize with your hands and with your eyes what you need to communicate to them. You can see where you're going so you don't fall or trip. You can see a movie, a TV show. You can see the outside world. At least you're able to communicate in that way. Imagine if you had neither of those senses. you would just be living in a dark, silent world. So the only way that you could do anything is just to react. If you're feeling upset or angry, you just cry. You just rage. And you can't even hear yourself when you're doing that. Helen's parents still had hope in finding help for her, though. In 1886, Helen's mother reached out to Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone, who was working on a hearing device for the deaf. He was able to direct them to the Perkins Institute for the Blind, where they were introduced to Anne Sullivan, a star student at the school. Anne, too, had been blind, but after several operations, eventually regained her sight. Upon graduating at only 20 years old, Anne traveled to Alabama, where she was able to build a connection with Helen and eventually help her communicate through sign language. It wasn't an easy transition, though, as Helen tormented Anne in the very beginning. She would pinch, kick, and hit Anne, even knocking out one of Anne's front teeth. You can understand that, can't you? Because there was no way for Helen to communicate. She had no idea what this strange woman was doing there and trying to take her hands and do, so she just reacted to the situation. But thankfully, much like Helen, Anne was very strong-willed, so she persevered until one day everything seemed to click with Helen, and she spelled water, W-A-T-E-R, in sign language through fingerspelling it in Anne's hand under running water from their well. So, sign language is when you can move your hands in different positions and form words so the other person can see it. But remember, Helen can't see. So the form of sign language that Anne used with her was fingerspelling. So in sign language, there's also the alphabet, A through Z. So Anne would spell out words with her hand and press them into Helen's hand so Helen knew what Anne was saying. Being able to communicate was a game changer for Helen and opened up a whole new world that she took full advantage of. Anne was able to talk Helen's parents into allowing her to go to the Perkins School for the Blind to continue her growth for a more appropriate education. That's the same school that Anne went to. While there, Helen made remarkable progress, even learning Braille on a specially made typewriter. She quickly became a public symbol for the school. So, by using a specially made typewriter, Helen was able to write herself and communicate with others exactly how she was feeling, or what she was thinking, or just whatever she wanted to say. Right here, do you see those raised dots? That is what Braille is. And those represent letters and words. So by using your fingers and running them across that, you can read in Braille, the same way we can read with our sight, if you have sight. At 14, Helen and Anne went to New York for 2 years, where Helen was able to focus on improving her speaking ability. Helen was doing so well that she started garnering the attention of very well-known people. Mark Twain was one of those people, and he was so impressed with Helen's achievements that he introduced her to his good friend Henry Rogers, president of the Standard Oil Trust Company. Rogers, too, was very impressed with Helen and decided to pay for her to attend college. So you probably recognize Mark Twain there, too. And he wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, a lot of stuff, but those are probably two of his most famous. At 19, Helen started Radcliffe College, which later merged with Harvard University. Helen was the first deaf-blind person to receive a Bachelor of Arts degree. While attending Radcliffe, Helen wasn't just a star student, but also gained recognition as an author, as she wrote 2 books, the first being The Story of My Life, published in 1903, and the second, Optimism, also published in 1903. So, school didn't come that hard to her, and during it, she was actually able to write 2 books. That's very impressive. As Helen's mentor and companion, Anne attended classes with her and ended up falling in love with Harvard instructor John Macy. The two married in 1905. Helen moved in with the couple so that Anne could continue assisting her. Helen continued writing books and articles, bringing attention to the deaf-blind community. But while doing so, she was also fighting for the rights of all, as she saw everyone as equal, regardless of race or gender. Helen was an outspoken supporter of the NAACP, as well as a supporter of women's rights. She fought for equal pay in the workplace and for voting rights of women. In 1913, Helen was one of thousands of women who marched in Washington, D.C. in the women's suffrage procession. And if you actually read those definitions and that glossary at the front of the book, you know that the women's suffrage procession was mainly about voting rights for women. And at that time, women could not vote. In 1924, Helen joined the American Federation for the Blind, AFB, which provided her a global platform to bring awareness to the needs of people with vision loss. So global platform is all over the world, not just here in America. In 1936, and after 49 years of loyal service to Helen, Anne Sullivan passed away. Helen didn't let this thwart her life's mission, though, or stop it. She continued to travel the world with her secretary, Polly Thompson. She was often found visiting war hospitals, giving hope to those soldiers who were newly blinded. She made it her mission to get funding for the rehabilitation and vocational training for them to get back into society in order to live a productive life. So they had to relearn everything as a blind person. So she went around giving hope to those people and help funding to give them the resources to acclimate back again in society. Helen Keller spent her life fighting for the underdog, and her legacy speaks for itself. Since her passing in 1968, there have been movies, books, and monuments erected in her honor. And this is one right here that is in Alabama. It says, this statue of Helen Keller was given to the National Statuary Hall Collection of Alabama in 2009. The life Helen Keller led was a beacon of hope for everyone with any disability, not just those with sight and hearing impairments. Her numerous accomplishments prove to the world that human potential has no bounds. In other words, you can do anything you want to do. Helen Keller is featured on the 2003 Alabama State Quarter along with her name in Braille. So right here you see her name on the quarter, and that's just the regular one that we can read. Right above it, I don't know if you can see it, but maybe you can. That's her name in Braille with the raised dots. And right here, this is highlights after her death. And I don't have to go through all of these. You can just kind of look at them after I stop here. But she did a lot of things after her death. There were a lot of accomplishments. And I think Helen Keller's achievements still continue now to inspire people, not just women, but everyone. Her life inspires all. I didn't know this one. This one right here in 2021, Mattel includes Helen in their Barbie Inspiring Women collection. So I wonder if that means that there's a Helen Keller Barbie doll. I don't know. That's pretty cool. So guys, I thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned a few extra things about Helen Keller. I did when I was researching this book. I did not know about the Barbie. I also didn't know about Mark Twain, to be honest, as being someone who helped her. So until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.